Welcome back to another episode of Be Our Guest here on Musical Theater Radio. I am your host, as always, Jean-Paul Jovanoff. I didn't have to go very far from my next interview, which is really nice. No time zone change. I'm not heading over to the UK for 5 hours difference. No international borders to cross. I'm just virtually jumping on the subway and heading into Toronto, which is fantastic. Today, we are speaking with the creator of the musical Dance of the Fox and founder of Fourscore Productions. Let's welcome to the show, Sean Yauk. Sean, how are you?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you.
Awesome. So I want to know a little bit about you. Before we get into everything else, I want to know who Sean is in 30 seconds. Give us the 30-second bio of Sean.
That won't be hard to do. Well, I am a theater creator, producer, actor, and composer based in Toronto. I grew up being a theater lover and got really interested in musical theater. I went to a performing arts high school in Toronto, and that led me to on the path of becoming a musical director. So I worked as a musical director and conductor for a little while studying music in university, amongst other things. And then I got a little bit more interested in arts management and producing. And so I went to graduate school for that. And afterwards found myself working for theater companies and music companies, doing things like production management, production design. And that has sort of led me to where I'm at right now, being a founder of a small emerging musical theater creation company based in Toronto. And in addition to that, I've worked as well as a composer and musical director and director as on the side, just trying to create as well. And so those are the two worlds that I straddle in, quote unquote, theater and performing arts, I like to say, because it's more broad.
Nice. So when you were growing up, were you surrounded by the arts? Was that a thing? Or were you the black sheep of the family who was the musical and theater guy?
That's a great question. I was definitely not a black sheep. The vibe in my family was theater all the time. My father, before he went into business, was an actor from Northern Ontario, and he was very, very passionate about musical theater. He made sure to take my brother and I to as many shows as he could, and that was really beneficial because we got so much exposure to all these different wild and zany shows. Smaller stuff, regional productions, as well as the big mega musicals that came through Toronto, Cats, Les Mis, and Phantom, and all those great ones. And yeah, that sort of is what inspired me to go into the world of theater.
Nice. So did you get to go down to Stratford quite a bit, and that sort of thing?
We did, yeah. We went over to Stratford. We got a lot of Stratford shows in over the years. And in addition to that, we sort of got to go down every year to New York to see a couple things. And nice. I think just the exposure was really, really something that I'm very lucky to have had when I was much younger. And without a doubt, that's definitely what inspired me to go into this world. I just admired everybody who I saw on stage, on top of the deck, actors and dancers and whatnot, and everyone under the deck as well, musicians and conductors, especially stage managers, everybody, all of the wheels of the production seemed to really, really interest me.
Yeah, you can't forget about the stage managers and the crew and all that stuff. Like they are so more. Whenever I direct a show, I always tell the actors, you know what? See these people over here? They're just as important, if not more, than you, because without them, you're not going to be able to do what you do. So
you're a smart guy, yeah, for sure. I mean, we talk about this a lot too, just in our little Fourscore team, but it's always looking at ways to support, those people who make up the backbone of the production as well, and finding ways to call everybody into the creative process in whatever way we can.
Definitely. So growing up, you said you went to the art school. Was it the Etobicoke School of the Arts?
I didn't. I actually went to a small regional arts school called Father John Redmond.
Okay.
It was a Catholic secondary school, and it was very close to Etobicoke School of the Arts. And a lot of my friends went to
Yeah,
Etobicoke School of the Arts, so there was a lot of we really gelled, a lot of our friend groups.
that's cool.
But yeah, I studied music. And it was a fantastic experience. I got to sort of perform a lot. We did a lot of run out gigs across the city and across the province. I was a bass player as well as a pianist and singer, and so that's those are sort of my roots. And in addition to all of that, outside of school, I did a lot of community theater and a lot of other musical theater projects with friends of mine who were emerging artists. And so that's sort of how eventually the two worlds, music and theater, meshed naturally.
No, I always ask, and well, not always, but sometimes I ask artists, did you always want to go into the arts, the theater, or was there a point where you kind of wanted to do something else for a brief flitting moment? Or
that's a really good question. I definitely was not always, destined to go into the arts. I definitely was interested, so interested in theater and musical theater when in high school. But at the same time, I was starting to sort of develop a passion for policy and policy and politics. There was a great program that I happened across that was offered at a small liberal arts college called Huron, an affiliate college of Western University. I applied and got in successfully and studied political science there and policy studies, actually, hoping to go into a public policy career.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I also did a minor in music theory and composition there. So I've always sort of been straddling, I like to think I've always sort of been straddling, two different worlds. In that portion of my life, it was politics and music. And at this time in my life, it's sort of arts management and arts creation. Two more natural spheres to be in, I'd say. But yeah, that's exactly, that sort of was a little bit of a deviation that I encountered on my journey. Although I've come back into the arts and like to think I've brought a lot from my years in policy studies and politics because of the the ways in which those two worlds, the arts and politics, are sort of meshed and intertwined, especially nowadays when there's so much work to be done in the ways of cultural policy advocacy, artist rights. There's a lot of great stuff that still interests me in that area, and that I think is important.
There's a lot of skill sets that can go back and forth between them. As a politician, performing, right? But
yep, 100%.
But on the back end, there's also working with people with different beliefs and different thoughts, and working for a common goal. Because in politics, you might have your sides and your beliefs, but you're still working for the people. Right, your province, your county, your state, your country, or whatever. So yeah, there's a lot of give and take, just like in the arts.
Definitely is. Oh yeah, for sure. I think that's a good way to put it. The two felt quite aligned when I was doing those two things, studying music and politics, because at the same time, I was running a really small student theater company based out of Huron called HUDS. That's an abbreviation for Huron Underground Dramatic Society, and it was actually sort of those three things are what got me interested in arts management, of all things, and arts management and arts marketing and development and producing. It sort of felt natural to try to work on my leadership skills and end up in that world, taking all of the stuff in my toolbox that I learned and sort of piecing things together, arts projects and undertakings and music theater and whatnot.
Perfect. Well, that's a great segue into Fourscore Productions. Tell us why and how you started it, and a little bit about it in general.
Sure. Fourscore Productions is a very small company I started in 2019. It's an itty bitty music-oriented storytelling production company. So a lot of my colleagues who I was working with in theater during undergrad, who were also musical directors and musicians, a lot of them were interested in finding a way to be of service to the musical theater community from that music, from the musical sphere. And so I sort of talked with a couple of them. We decided that it would be appropriate for us to start a company dedicated to developing musical works that were original and new, but also producing music-oriented storytelling projects. And when I say that, it doesn't necessarily mean, capital M musicals. They might also be song cycles. They might also be different types of cabaret productions, ways essentially for artists to explore musical storytelling with different components of the music and with all of those working pieces. And what we did is we put on a couple of little workshops of a few original song cycles and musicals. And at that stage, we were just figuring out really who we were and whether or not we would continue or we would have to sort of redefine Fourscore. Might have been too much of a niche approach to the world of musical theater, just focusing on the music. Yeah. However, we were successfully put a couple of those things on. And we connected with a lot of artists who were interested in finding their voice, who didn't have musical training. And I should say music training. Artists who were performers and actors who would have liked to learn a little bit more about, things like music theory, music history, even composition, in order to add to their toolbox as performing arts professionals. And so we did a little bit of that. We provided some training to these artists, equipped them with some skills, and also helped to network them with musical theater professionals in order to help develop their own projects as well. And that sort of has been a big component of what we've done. Hence the name Fourscore. It's really for the score, which is of service to obviously the show or the musical ultimately. And that's where we are right now. We produce projects, we help train artists and help with artist development in music in the context of musical theater. And we also have recently become a label producing some new albums and new EPs. And we have a couple exciting projects that are coming out soon from some artists who definitely have been spending this quarantine time to work on some pretty fascinating stuff.
Wow. Well, congratulations on getting it off the ground. And that's always the
Thank you.
hardest part. But of course, sure. Like you said, you started in 2019, and then, as we all know, what happened in 2020. How have you been able to, lack of a better term, pivot or figure out how to keep your company going without being able to, meet in person anymore?
Sure. Another great question. Well, for us, the first thing that we did is, I should go back and say when Doomsday happened, March 2020, and things started to shut down. We started to see the awful effects that COVID had. We were going into workshop and development for a new work called Lessons on Loving, which eventually became Dance at the Fox. So we had a team assembled. We had a book writer, and unfortunately, workshops got canned. We weren't able to do anything in person. And also, it was tough because it was at a time when myself, along with a lot of other colleagues involved, lost their jobs working as performers and musicians and stagehands and designers in the theater world. Projects got postponed indefinitely. And so we sort of had to wind things down and put things on the back burner in terms of the project we were working on for a little bit. Although we sort of got things back together when we learned about how to do this stuff virtually, how to meet virtually, and the hardest part, how to rehearse and record and explore new material virtually. I'm sure you know, as a director, it's very challenging when you're not there in person to explore new work. And I think that the workshop process is so valuable. When it's in person, you learn from each other. Artists breathe life into the piece, and the piece changes. So we tried our best to adapt to the virtual sphere and get this project back off the ground and up and rolling. But it wasn't really working as a piece of conceptual musical theater. We just found that the project had to be sort of stripped down. And we realized, being a company that focuses on the musical component of musical theater, we thought that we should try to undertake creating an album, a concept album that would be released later, and trying to get everything done, recorded, and put together virtually with all these different artists. And we successfully did that. In March, we launched our album for the project called Dance of the Fox. And we've got more updates on that coming soon. But that's sort of what we did. And I think that gave us a lot of hope and optimism, being able to finally launch something, put something out into the world, and also figure out how to, as we've said, pivot, become also a label as well that produces albums and records and whatnot. And so that's sort of is what we've done since COVID really hit. And that's sort of where we're at now. We've redefined ourselves as, as I said, a company that produces albums, musical theater albums and original albums, in addition to musical theater work and services. Yeah.
Well, now before we get to Dance and Fox, I just want to ask, what type of skill sets have you learned? Because the pandemic has forced us to change and figure new things out. What skill set did you not think you were going to need to learn that you were forced to learn, and we're so happy that you got this skill now in your toolkit?
Well, I mean, the first one is definitely digital communications. It took surprisingly a lot of time and effort to figure out what sort of infrastructure we'd need to produce and record a project, all being detached from one another. So that's a pretty tactile skill set that I think a lot of people have been forced to learn, regardless of what area they work in. And in addition to that, we definitely have had to learn. We've also had to learn how to approach teaching music and coaching vocals when we're not physically with a singer, with an artist. That was something that we had to sort of approach very differently, in the sense of making changes to our music and figuring out how to fix latency issues on Zoom and all the good stuff like that, and therefore be able to capture the artist's work. And then in addition to that, I like to think of these new projects as being, 50% is the development component that you'd have in a regular theater production, right? Rehearsing and building the show, and then maybe teching, and then even when we get to presentation, finally putting stuff down, then we go into editing. And that's, oh man, it's so much extra. It's so much extra work that we didn't anticipate being such a huge component of it. But yeah, we had to figure out how to work with mixing engineer to properly mix and master the piece, to clean everything up, and then eventually present it, launch it. So I'd say a lot of tactile skills learned in the situation. And it's been, we feel great to have finally figured out how to do this now and gotten our first project out there. Although, yeah, it was frustrating, coming from a sort of more traditional musical theater production background. So, right, I'm really proud of our company and sort of what we've done and how everyone's been so willing and able, especially artists, to figure out how to use some of this equipment, recording equipment, that is. But yeah, it's just a part of life for all of us now that we've gotten it figured out.
And that's the thing, as artists, like 8-10 months ago, COVID hit and a wall went up and we all just stared at it. But then eventually we just went, wait, it's only a 2-foot wall. We can look around it and go, hey, we can figure out a way to, keep going with what we're doing. We're just gonna have to find a different way. And the nice thing is the skill sets you've learned and we've all learned, we're going to be able to keep going, right? We took 1 step back, but
I hope so.
We've been able to move 2 steps forward, which is fantastic. So again, congrats on that. And so let's delve into the show Dance of the Fox, because that is a show we play on the station with our
Sure, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that, what the show is, and a little bit more about it.
Sure, of course. Well, Dance of the Fox was originally a piece called Lessons on Loving. It was a song cycle that was in development. This was based on, strangely, a series of spam emails that a couple of our colleagues had. So we actually did a deep dive through junk email folders. We found a lot of spam emails that were coming from quote unquote escort agencies, and a lot of unsolicited messages that you'd usually overlook. And then a friend of ours' email got hacked, and so they started receiving a bunch of these emails from escort agencies. So mysterious and strange. Although we we found the emails to be extremely lyrical, to be also very, very, very playful and empowering. We didn't expect that, but we took a look at a couple of them that stood out. We worked with a couple of book writers to sketch out some character ideas of sort of modern day escorts who were taking on the forms of superheroes, of all things. And we actually tried to breathe life into these characters by giving them songs and giving them music, and sketching out a narrative. That's the point in production that we got to when we reached state of shutting things down and when COVID hit. That was back last year in March. And so we decided to, when we decided to sort of revive the project and continue working on it, we just wanted to keep things fairly abstract. We wanted to take these characters, give them power, and also give them a feminist forward perspective, and a way to essentially discuss the work that they do in a non-stigmatized way, in an empowering way, rather. And so we actually also talked to a lot of different quote unquote escort agencies and escort professionals to make sure that we were approaching the content in a sensitive and appropriate manner. And they gave us a lot of ideas on how we could continue to empower these characters and eventually bring them to life through the music. And so we did that. And we worked with some awesome musicians on this project, and some awesome performers and vocalists, some of them based in Indiana, Germany, Denmark, Serbia, and also Canada. We made sure that that we had the tools provided to them, the recording equipment provided, so that they could lay the tracks down, and we sort of guided them through the process. But we also wanted the music to sort of pay homage to early 2000s pop club music mixed with jazz and soul. That's the tone of the score, and meshing that with the narrative and the ideas of these characters, these empowered characters who were essentially decreeing their profession and trying to destigmatize the work that they do. The result was the project concept album that got released. And this is still early stages for the project because we're in the process of expanding the album and bringing a new book writer on board to further guide this project. Although I'll say at this point that it's been interesting because it's jumped around from being, a workshop for a show to being a workshop for a song cycle, to eventually being a concept album. It feels like as the project has progressed, we've sort of taken steps back in the development process. And so because of that, we don't actually think that's a bad thing. We've been also looking at a lot of musicals that came out of the 60s and 70s, particularly a lot of Lloyd Webber's work.
Yeah.
A lot of his work that started as just, sketched out concept albums, pretty abstract, yet with a narrative. Works like Evita and Jesus Christ Superstar were huge. Were huge when they were released as albums, and then eventually picked up and developed by theater producers. Yeah. So in a weird way, we have sort of moved backwards in terms of Dance of the Fox development. However, we're hopeful that perhaps we can continue to move forwards after this, when we really focus on getting the score further enhanced and completed, and getting everything else written and developed. And so that's the project and the project's history and sort of where it's headed.
Nice. How did you find your artists? Because you said they were from Denmark and Canada and Indiana and everything. How did you find all these people? Because obviously, if COVID had never happened, this whole, everything we think of as being an alternate universe of, you wouldn't have found the probably person in Denmark and Indiana. So how did you
Sure. That's a great question. We did a lot of research online to find vocalists who had the power we were looking for and the experience, but also those who were interested in this project, because part of it is the idea of a lot of the characters, the escorts, being based in Eastern Europe. So we were looking for a specific type of accent as well. And yeah, we were able to spend a lot of time searching the web, doing research, connecting with artists, offering auditions, and without the bounds of having to necessarily work with the artists we had at arm's length or arm's reach. Because of COVID, we were able to look all over the world in a way to find the right artist for the project, and that was in the end really exciting, because bringing all these artists together, they had such unique perspectives and approaches to their craft. That was a really magical time for us when we finally got everyone together to start building the piece from all over the world. And so, yes, I think that because of the restrictions and because we were forced into doing this all online virtually, we had really no bounds in terms of who we could get. We could really reach out to a lot of artists all over. So we're proud to say it's sort of an international cast at this point, and it's continuing to build. That's how we found these people.
Do you see yourself going in that direction in the future with other projects, or do you think you'll go back to more traditional, people in town will find you, we'll go to a setup, or maybe a hybrid? How do you see yourself? I've been thinking a lot about that, because I really like I really like to serve a role in continuing to build opportunities for artists locally. I'm a proud Torontonian, and I love the theater scene here, and there's some incredible artists. And so I think we do definitely want to focus locally in the next little bit. Although it's broadened our perspective, having artists come in from all over the world to put these things together. Just because without the limits on who we can bring in due to geographic restrictions, because we're in the virtual world. Yeah, we definitely enjoy that.
Although, yeah, in the meantime, we definitely do want to continue to work with artists locally if we can. And I really like the traditional, as you mentioned, the traditional process for developing a work. I think it has worked, and I also think that there are a lot of great things that come of it. But I guess we have to wait patiently until we're able to do that again. And yeah, that's sort of what I think about it. I think we'd love to bring in artists from all over, but we're sensitive to the fact that we also really want to continue to be of service to this arts community locally here.
Very cool. Very cool. Since I'm part of it, I'm very happy with it. So
I'm glad.
Thank you. So if you can talk about it, what other future projects do you have on the go with yourself or even with Fourscore Productions?
Yeah, great question. I mean, we're currently in the process of expanding and building Dance of the Fox, but we also have a song cycle coming up that I'm currently working on. I'm serving as the composer. A colleague of mine, who's my business partner, is serving as the arranger and orchestrator. Mm-hmm. And we're working with another small emerging theater company in Toronto called On Its Way Productions. We're in the process of building this out, hopefully to be announced in June of this year, 2021. And in addition to that, we've got another concept album that's also being sketched out that we're planning to go into development with in about a month in May. And we're really excited for that one. It's a very different idea, different story. And again, a local book writer. We can't tell you who yet, but we sure are excited to share the name in the news once we can.
I get a lot of that on the program. I can't tell you. I want to, but I can't tell you yet. I'm like, all right, fine. I will wait like everybody else.
Exactly. It's the wait, but it's hopefully worth it. Nobody has many places to go right now. So yeah, I guess it's it's a bit tease, but it's we're very excited to get our next two projects announced and developed and produced.
Well, congratulations on starting the company.
Thank you.
It going and seeing that there's a lot of forward momentum and you've got a lot of stuff on your plate coming up.
Of course. Oh, well, thanks so much. That means the world.
No problem. So Sean, thank you for coming on and talking to me today and letting the world know about the good stuff that's happening in Toronto. The podcast goes out to the world and everybody knows about their own little areas, but it's always nice to promote a local person and help them find a global, foothold of some kind.
That's really nice to hear. I mean, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. And thank you to MTR for all the great stuff they put out there.
Well, thank you. But before we go, I always ask 3 questions of my guests. There's no right or wrong answers, but we're going to learn a little bit about you and decide for ourselves whether you have some wrong answers.
Okay.
So question number 1, it's probably the easiest of them all. What creator or team within the musical theater world has had a great influence on you? Now, this could be a composer, lyricist, director, producer, actor, stage manager, or it could be somebody famous, not famous, maybe like a teacher or a vocal teacher or something like that. Is there anybody in the musical theater world who's influenced you?
Yes, definitely. In terms of creative duos, definitely Gwen Verdon and Bob Fosse. Classics, staples in the musical theater canon in terms of the work they've done together, and a lot of the pieces that they collaborated on directly. Sweet Charity, Chicago, those have sort of been those are some of the first shows that I heard the soundtrack to when I was a lot younger. We had the records, and so I sort of grew up with it, but I just adore the things that Fosse and Verdon did. Such dynamic and incredible work.
So true. Correct answer. Can't go wrong with that one.
I got it right.
Question number 2. Since you had a political background, you did politics and stuff like that.
Yeah.
If you could sit down the arts and cultural ministers of Ontario or Canada, what would you tell them right now?
Well, I definitely would say a lot. I think that Cole's Notes,
Sure.
definitely right now. I mean, the performing arts have, in all honesty, they've been decimated. There have been a few opportunities for artists and creators to, to practice their craft. We've tried to adapt the best we can, and the support, though it's been there in terms of financial support for small companies and for artists directly, it's been there, but it hasn't been direct enough. I think that having representation, continued representation for not just the arts, but also the charitable and not-for-profit sector at the public policy tables is going to be of huge importance in order to get the cultural sphere back off the ground, back up and running. I think that artists, we need to also think a lot about how we can directly support artists, because it's difficult to respond to the changing times if you are uncertain, if you're as an artist, when you're going to be going back to work, when the opportunities will be there for you to do what you do again, if they will be there again. And so, appreciating the impact that artists have is step one, and step two is finding ways to make support more direct and pointed for those individuals.
Nice. Well, that is definitely a correct answer.
I'm glad to hear that as well.
And all the politicians that are listening right now, please take note of what Sean said. You are not just speaking, Sean, for Ontario and Canada. You're speaking for the world now. Global artists.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
What you're saying can be applied anywhere. So thank you for that. So correct answer for question number 2.
Oh, so, I'm glad.
Question number 3, and this is one that's going to tell us who you really are.
Yeah.
Food in the theater or cell phones in the theater? Which is worse?
I have to say cell phones. Okay. And that's because anything that takes you away from the story being told, it just really irks me. I think that well, first of all, it's very distracting to the performers, to the musicians and actors on the stage. But in addition to that, it's also just it's not allowing you to be in the moment. Mm-hmm. It's taking you out of the moment, and the moment that's where the magic exists. That's really where we should be, where we should want to find ourselves when we go for a night out at the theater. Or out to the theater in the afternoon. So definitely cell phones. Food, food maybe will be enhancing your experience. It might not be enhancing the experience of those sitting right next to you when it's a crinkly wrapper around a candy. But I think that more so cell phones, because they take you out of the moment, and that's not good.
All right. Well, I also would have accepted both are awful. But you are correct with your answer.
Oh, good. 3 for 3. Okay.
Very good shot. I have no prizes, but that's all
okay.
I got. It's just Sean, thank you again so much for coming on and talking to me today and letting us know about what you do in Fourscore Productions.
Oh, sure. Thanks for having me. Very happy to have had a chance to chat.
Awesome. All right, everybody, tune in next week as we'll be speaking with another guest or guests about their life, love, and passion that is musical theater. I am your host, as always, Jean-Paul Jovanov, and I will see you when I see you.